you for joining us for the webinar on the role of big data in recruitment. I'm Savita from Vikas, and I will walk you through the agenda for today's webinar. We have having with us Mr. Vikas Verma, Director at AON Hewitt, Predictive Assessment for Hiring and Development. First of all, I'd like to give you a brief on the TA Leadership League that we have in place. The TA Leadership League is an initiative, is especially designed for the TA leaders, helping them make talent acquisition and take them to the next level. The League is of a bunch of activities like the newsletters, the masterclasses like this one, twangouts, half-day events, annual conference, and of course the awards. Just to give you the webinar that we are going to have today, the masterclass is on the role of big data in recruitment. The changing composition force and the pace of technology change is diminishing the barriers between the internal and the external worlds. There are so many possibilities, which is limitless. Our speaker today is going to cover all of these. So a little speaker, Vikas is a director at AON Hewitt's Talent and Performance Consulting practice. With over 16 years of professional experience, he has extensive consulting experience in the areas of talent management, organization transformation and structuring, performance management, change management, and process improvement. Before joining AON Hewitt, Vikas has worked with IBM Consulting, HUL, ITC, and ICI. Today's webinar for making us this event absolutely possible are AON Hewitt and Cornerstone on Demand. AON Hewitt, of course, is the global leader in the human resource solutions with over 30,000 professionals in 90 countries, serving more than 20,000 clients worldwide. AON Hewitt is a leader in the design and implementation of reliable and valid assessment tools. The tools objectively measure the abilities and skills and personal attributes that predict job performance, job fit, and employee retention. Cornerstone on Demand is a leader of cloud-based talent management software solutions. Over 15.5 million users across 191 countries rely on Cornerstone's cloud-based applications to recruit, train, manage, and connect people across organizations. To begin with the webinar, I would request all the listeners and viewers to of course, just to set their expectations of the webinar today through the chat section that we have in place, so that Vikas would have the right expectation in covering all of these during his masterclass today. Your chat section at your right-hand side in the corner. We have saved you to ask your questions at the end of the webinar. So for those watching it live, you may submit your questions live in the Q&A section, and we respond to them as many as possible. We are in the full exciting mode of the agenda for today's webinar, and Vikas will take the lead. So without any delay, I hand over the microphone to Vikas. Over to you, Vikas.
Thank you, Savita. Good morning, everyone. So today we have an exciting topic with us. The only challenge that I have is probably 30 minutes is not enough to cover whole of big. So what I've tried to do is we will put in the overview of big data, of what big data is, how it applies to the recruitment function, and I'll end the session with sharing a typical methodology or the step-by-step approach of that you can adopt to the utilize in your hiring processes. And of course, after that, if you have any of the questions, you can ask, and I'll also be available offline after the presentation in case you want to through any email with me and discuss any of the challenges, anything of interest during the presentation today. So to start it, let's look at the definition of big data, because we keep hearing about big data. I'm sure there are a lot of assumptions of what big data is. And then there are several definitions. If you do a Google, you'll find several definitions of this. And when I see our teams internally, the IO psychologists, what they tell me is, it's nothing new. We have been doing predictive analytics for a very long time, perhaps starting from the World War II and onwards. However, what has really changed about the big data is the technology that has come in and the kind of platforms that we have, the Web 2.0 platforms, and the variety of data that we're giving in. And the computer speed of analyzing data has gone up tremendously. It's now available on a desktop. So if you look at the definition of data, we are really looking at extremely large data sets that may be analyzed computationally to reveal trends and associations, especially relating to human behavior and interaction. And that's where it becomes interesting from a recruitment perspective. Now, before the recruitment, I thought it will be interesting to see some of the application big data, some of the interesting applications that the analysts have been putting big data to. So then, one company which is some analysis on looking at your people who use Twitter every day and the kind of relationship that they are into. How long, how stable the relationship. Now you may say that no cause and effect between the two, but when you have data, you can analyze it probably to throw some insight. Another interest, there's a case study in the US which actually it goes like, so there is a grandfather or let's say an old man who's the father of a daughter, and he starts to receive promotional material on being a new parent. He's actually, and this man is early 60s. So he's surprised. He's getting promotional material on being a new parent, and he calls up this real chain and says that congratulations, your daughter is actually perhaps expecting a child. That's why we're sending these promotional materials to you. And what was happening with the kind of data that these companies are churning out, they could actually track that somebody in that house, in that address, actually browsing through a lot of new, which is relevant, of products that are relevant for a newborn baby, and hence they started sending those promotional materials. Those very targeted promotional materials that were being sent out. So applicants can be as diverse as this, and people are using it. Some of them, there are also a lot of noise around this that is getting into our privacy. And I think from a recruitment perspective as well, that there are words of caution in terms of what we can and what we cannot analyze. So in the nutshell, essentially, big data is we do have limited access to data, and we have tools. So data alone is not useful unless you have tools to analyze the data. It's not of much use. And what this is doing is it's driving two major trends. First, it's improving to find unique and valuable insights, and second, the acceptance of empirically derived decisions related to people. In fact, look, I was just going through one of the articles in the Economist recently, which actually talked about an interesting fact. Often as recruiters, when we're looking at the resumes, we have a hypothesis that candidates who are changing jobs frequently are likely to leave earlier than rest, right? And research actually, this is a research done by Professor Peter Capaldi from Wharton with another company in the US. What they found was they did a correlation between the attrition data and the frequency of job changes before joining this particular company. And they actually found no significant correlation to suggest that a person who's changing jobs frequently is more likely to leave than the other person. Which essentially that are we, because of this bias we have, which is not data-based or data-driven, are we actually rejecting candidates who would potentially have much more value if we would have hired them, because this hypothesis assumption that we have is actually not true. So that the big data can actually throw from the recruit perspective. Recruitment process itself, recruitment, actually we're looking at identification of talent, and you will have several steps in identification of talent. In fact, before I come to this slide, if I take you to the next one, recruitment without data. So you have various processes. So you are sourcing CVs, you are screening those CVs, you're doing job reviews, you're doing psychometric assessments, ability assessments, reference checks, interviews, and background verification. Now, all of you may not be doing all of these things for all the jobs, but broadly, these are some of the process steps that you would be using in some form or shape your recruitment process. Now without these processes, screening steps are like isolated islands. They're not connected to each other. So what's happening in the screening stage may not be transferred to the interview stage. Many times, don't know what we're screening in a CV and why are we screening in a CV. So we know we need a 12th pass, we know 60%. Why do we need 60%? We don't know. Maybe somebody has told us we just need 60% 12th pass. So has anyone done analysis or big data analysis to see will 10th pass be less successful on this job? We probably don't know. Similarly, when I've covered in the CV and the person is going to interview stage, is the interviewer repeating the same screening steps that have already been performed in the CV screen, or are building on to what we've screened on the CV stage, and we are validating some of the screening patterns and adding on to that. So all these processes could be sitting like an isolated island. And what this results into is you have an application of talent approach which is fairly fragmented, and the chances actually identifying a good talent out of it would be as good as a flipping of a coin. And that's why I call this process, a fragmented process, as good as following a law of average. Now, if we are actually using the big, then what we're doing is we have information available from multiple sources. We were using assessment predictive and data connected. And I'll talk about assessments in a later, because I'm not talking of assessments as a pen and paper, multiple choice question paper. Assessment is anything. So CV screen is a type of assessment. Your background verification is a type of assessment. Your interview assessment. Because at any where you are screening people, if 5 people died or 5 people are going through a process step and 3 are coming out from the other side of the funnel, it is an assessment or a screening process. And each of these processes is connected. Each of these processes needs to be normed to the right standards. Now, which norms are we using? That we need to be careful of. Looking at the organizational social fit or the culture and the value, and then aligning all our being processes to that. And tailored fit for organization and roles. And I'll talk about a bit about tailored fit as well as we move along. And even now, it's not that we didn't know about these things earlier. There are 2 things that bring, the new approach to hiring. One is actually the technology. And I think in context, it is technology which is driving the adoption of the new hiring approach more than anything else. So there is a thing which allows us to integrate these processes and create those linkages that we aspire to have. We always knew that linkage has to be there, but technology is making it easier for us to do it. Just to move the whole recruitment process from being an art to a science. And because technology, we are able to adopt some of the principles and methods which, as I said, probably developed in the World War II, post-World War II scenario. That's the time most of quality assessments were actually developed, and that's why I keep referring to that. The technology allows us to tailor it to our organization. And the reason I'm mentioning it needs to be tailored to my own organization, because hiring, the technical jobs, so if you're hiring for a Java skill from a company A to a company B, those technical skills could be the same. The standards could be the same. But in recruitment, you're just not looking at the technical skills. You're also looking at the behavioral skills and the culture. And no 2 organizations, even if they're in the same industry, will have the same culture. And hence, the more you start using an industry norm or a country norm, you're actually you might end up more damage to hiring process, good, because what really differs you from your from your nearest competitor would be your culture. And big data technologies allow us to really create assessments or recruitment processes which help you that tailored fit. Now what do I a tailored fit? If you look at a process which is interconnected and every step has a purpose. Now what I have in this table is all the assessment tools that you typically use in a recruitment process. This is exactly the same as what I showed you in a couple of slides earlier. So you have CV screen, you have cognitive ability assessments, modern personality inventories, and you can go on and on. Structured interview, unstructured interview. And possibly a lot of you could be using some step to screen people which are not even mentioned there. So this is just a sample. Now, you are essentially hiring for competencies, and those competencies can be broken down from a measure perspective to what we call as KSAPCs, which is knowledge, skills, abilities, and personal characteristics. And we all, from prior research, the predictivity with job performance for each of the assessment tools which are there. So if you look at the CV screening, CV screening is suited to use it for knowledge skills screening. So what do I mean by that? Knowledge essentially will come from one of the source of assessing knowledge is using educational qualifications. So we assume that he has done an MBA from an Ivy League institute. He will have a superior knowledge of business management than somebody else. Now that's our assumption. With the CV, you could actually assess that. Similarly, skills typically come through experience. And I have a certification on Java, which is a knowledge, but I have also done 200 hours of Java coding, and I have not had defects. So that's a skill that I can check. But, and with CV, you can actually screen that. However, the fee of using CV screening tool is low. The good thing is that the cost is low, and that's the reason we look at CV screening. But because the predictive validity is low, what you will do is when designing recruitment processes, you will ensure that whatever you are screening, whatever you are assessing in knowledge and skills, through a CV screening, so get assessed through some other method as well. So if you are assessing for Java, you will ensure that either you are taking a coding assessment or you are assessing that same skill again through an interview. And that's the reason we say that every skill or every KSAPC should be measured at least twice in the recruit process. Now this is which we know what is the purpose of each stage. We also know what is the predictive validity of this process, and we know the cost. And by combining these in each job, we can actually create a very, very effective and efficient recruitment process. Now, all this, we probably know this and we want to do this. What's the benefit that we get out of this? Now, let's look at the predictive analysis that actually can be done and what's the difference when we talk about big data. We have on the top is probably what we get every day. We're hiring a person. So we ask him to take a personality assessment or even a aptitude assessment. And what we get is a very generic report. So we say on adaptation and adaptability and innovation, this person is a 5 on a scale of 1 to 5. On reliability, through this person is 1. Okay, so this means how do I pose to my job, to my organization is not very clear. Now if you apply a score with big data, and this in context, let's take big data of, let's say we are hiring this person for a sales role. And in this role, big performance predictors that I want to hire for. I'm looking at sales, the ability, and I'm looking at retention. Can I retain this individual higher than my normal average retention? So if I look at two outcome parameters, sales and retention, and on the other side, On the income side, I look at the various competency scores of an individual. If I do a correlation analysis, then my big data report will look some similar to which I'm showing on the bottom right side of things, which is plotting a rate on the sales index and the retention index. Now, what one of competencies between adaptability, interpersonal skills, persuasion, reliability, and follow-through and drive, I don't need to know. If I can just put these combinations on this graph. Now imagine giving the first competency profile to your business head for when he's interviewing candidate. He probably does it reliability and follow-through means. As to that, if you give this report on as a success indices, and we say that, you know, Vikas Verma is actually low on retention, but he's very high on sales. Now the business take a more informed decision about whether we should be hiring this person or what are the things that you probe him on. Why was he leaving off? Why is he a retention risk? Or a great candidate who I think will stay, but probably his ability to sell is not very high. So this report really becomes much more meaningful for the organization and much more predictive. Report perspective is, if we look at the analysis that we have been doing for our clients, now this is the post. So all the candidates who have been hired, we are tracking performance. And mention that big data essentially means you're getting a variety of data. We're not talking of just recruitment data. We're talking of business data, performance data that can be mapped to employees or candidates. So the gray line is candidates who were not assessed in a scientific way while they were getting hired, and the red line is the candidates who were actually hired through a scientifically designed assessment process. And there is a very statistically significant difference in the amount of weekly sales that you can see by the people who went through a scientifically designed instrument. So the retention. Now retention, looking at percentage of people who went after let's say 1 year. And again, the red line shows that there were a higher percentage of employees who were retained, who were selected through a scientifically designed recruitment process as opposed to a process which is typically designed. Right? So it is possible today to create these analytics and take it back to my recruitment. Now, sometimes what happens, showing you the positive graph. Now, sometimes you may not get a story. So I'll give an example for one of our clients where we were actually, they always measure by function, by age, tenure. He said, because we want to hire competency, let's measure attrition by competency. And the most important competency for them was customer service. And attrition normal matrix was saying 18%, but the moment we took attrition by customer service orientation, it was 40%, not acceptable. Now that was the big insight, which would not have happened if we had not looked at the data from that perspective. So there are multiple insights that we can create. Now I have this question in your mind that how much of data is big data? Right? So I have 100,000 people, or I have a company with 2,000 people. So is big data of the organization? So how much data, and from a risk perspective, what we have is you actually don't need data for doing big data analysis. It can actually start. So prediction power obviously increases with more individual data points. But you don't more than, let's say, 2,000, 2,500 data points. After that, if you look at it's becoming almost a flat, it starts tapering, the slope very low. So you can generate 2,000 data points for any job, for any key objective that you're looking at. That's big data for you. So think about millions and millions of data sets. It's about 2,000 data points, and most important, variety of data. So are we able to look at sales data, the retention data, the training failure rate? Can I look at the customer satisfaction data? Can I look at the number of defects? Anything is related to performance. And from the hiring perspective, can I look at TV? Can I look at the networking of the candidate on LinkedIn, for example? Can I look at his performance on aptitude test, on personality test, on the interview? So that's my, the variable data that I have. So all this data, so the variety of data, you should beyond what you typically measure. And from a variety perspective, look at the job performance data as well. Right? And you can actually look at various data points as you do this whole process. So what I'll quickly try to cover a typical process that you can follow for designing a predictive hiring process. And I've also points that you need to this recruitment process that is based on big data. So the first thing is, recruitment is a dynamic process, not a static solution. So while design a recruitment process, you need to have a process for continuous refinement. But the start is the design process. And for design process, you don't need more than 100 data points for a particular job. So let's say designing a recruitment process for an individual contributor role in a particular job, let's say coding or project management or sales or manufacturing. You first need to identify the skills that are required to be successful in the job. You need to identify what is required from a company fit perspective, and then to review how will you assess this. So if you recall, I showed you, the CV screening, background reference checks, aptitude test, interview. So you need to make that mix and say, okay, what are the two methods used to measure IT skills? What are the two methods I will use to measure company fit? Once you have done the content design in terms of, which are the tools that you're going to use, then you need to put that through a validation process. Now for valid 300 data points, and you can do it on your existing employees. So you look at the data of your existing employees and take a strategy of low performing employees, high performing employees, and the average performing employees based on the performance parameters that you have identified, like sales or customer satisfaction scores or number of defects or training scores, anything. And put your hypothesis through a validation check and see whether there are tools or the processes that you have decided to use for identifying the best talent, they predict. And we measure through reliability and validation, which is essentially what we're doing is criterion validation, and there are simple methods to do that. So we're not going into that, but any statistician can help you with criterion analysis that we can do. Once we have done that, then we implement. And at the implementation stage, what's very important is to ensure that you're able to track the data and map candidate. Because in recruitment, what typically happens, the candidate doesn't have an employee ID. So all the data candidates may be lost the moment the candidate is converted to an employee. So employee has an employee ID. The most of the we see in big data analytics and recruitment is we are not able to map the performance ratings or the sales data with the interview data that we have for the candidate. Because as a Vikas Verma, but as an employee, I have an employee ID 1, 2, 3, 4, and the two don't talk to each other in the system. And imagine in data points, how will you clean your Excel sheet? It's a nightmare. So in implementation, you need to look at these data integration aspects to ensure that you're getting data for your analysis. Once we have implementation where they are capturing clean data, then you can actually start doing a return on investment review every time you have data points or more, and see whether whatever hypothesis you had, that my assessment or recruitment process, which comprises of CV screening, a structured interview, an aptitude test, and a background verification, is it working or do I need to tweak anything? And analytics will show that you probably need to tweak certain things. You need to look for more information on CV, or you need to look for less information on CV. You need to add some other assessment tool in the process. You do that, and then it becomes a continuous process. Right? This is a process nutshell, and I can take a full day on just taking you through this process. So I'll quickly stop here. I don't have anything else to talk about today, and I'll open up for any questions that you may have.
An absolutely enlightening session on big data. Looking at the time, we have crossed the time, so we might not be able to take a lot of questions, but citing that there are a lot of questions. Let me take one. I would request you to just keep it a little crisp there. Now, here we have one question from Navjeet Gill. What attributes should be assessed for getting this big data in company reports? Is there anything you'd like to share on this apart from the presentation? Anything?
The question clearly?
What attributes assessed for getting this big data in company reports?
If I understand the question correctly, so we're not looking at the company reports as such. The company reports you will look at only if you're doing a group analysis. So let's say you are looking at the attributes of the senior leadership, and then your company report, your financial data, or your balance data, or your new initiatives that are typically there in the company report. You could do some big data analytics on that at a group level, see whether you have the right composition to be driving the organized strategy, and then take individual recruitment decisions. To give you an example, we did a project with a big IT company where we analyzed the top team effectiveness, and we realized that the team was not very balanced when it comes to managing people. And that had an impact getting the team balance right. Now, it could have a succession planning issue outcome, or it could have a recruitment outcome. So the next recruitment that you're doing in the leadership team, you may focus more on getting somebody who will be more people-focused and hence bring that balance in the team.
I understand there are many more questions, but we may have to take it offline. Please, I would request all the viewers to please note Vikas's email ID, vikas.verma@5@aonhewitt.com, because he is very willing to respond to all your questions that you have. Paucity of time, we might have to limit the wrap-up, the question session here for today's webinar. Once again, thank you, today's webinar partners, AON Hewitt and Cornerstone on Demand, for being there. And of course, special thanks to Vikas, who has been very patient and very wonderfully explained the entire big data in such a simplified manner. It has always been very complex to understand, but it has been very simple to understand for a layman as well. Thank you so much, Vikas, for that as well. And thank you, everybody, for participating in today's presentation. You may please feel free to reach out to Vikas for any questions that you may have. Thank you so much, with many more.
Thanks, everyone. I hope it was useful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.